Hi people, this is the second part of my February wrap-up. As I mentioned in my first video, I read the first four of the Lemony Snicket series, then I read Old Man's War by John Scalzi and the Star Wars book Tarkin by James Luceno. I also managed to read 3 non-fiction in the month of February. Wasn't really intending to read any of them, it just kind of happened, and I'm happy to announce that I had a goal of reading 4 non-fiction this year, and I've already met that goal in February. I'll probably end up reading a couple more. The first one that I read is As You Wish by Cary Elwes. Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride. I'm not going to say too much about this one other than I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. My wife and I did a joint review because I listened to it with her. I'm going to link that down below. It's pretty entertaining. It's already become one of my most popular videos. Probably just because of the fact that my wife is in it, because she's a lot cooler than I am. The second non-fiction book that I read, I don't actually own, I listened to it on audiobook, was American Sniper by Chris Kyle. Like I've said before, it's hard for me to rate non-fiction, especially with something like American Sniper, because he's talking about something very personal to him, and also a topic in war, and specifically the war in Afghanistan, and killing people. And so, like I said, it's hard to give a rating to it. I gave it 4 stars, not so much for the entertainment value, but because I appreciated how honest Chris Kyle and his wife Taya was. One of the things that Chris Kyle says, like really early on in the book, is that he didn't really feel like telling the story, but he knew that his story had gotten enough publicity that it was eventually going to be told by somebody, and he figured better him than someone else. And he seems to be just pretty honest and upfront with stuff. He doesn't seem to aggrandize it too much. I really appreciated that. I really liked the parts, his wife wrote parts of the book from her perspective, and that to me revealed a lot more of who Chris Kyle was than anything. It was very sad. I think he did 6 tours in Iraq, and he finally came home for good, and him and his wife had issues because he'd been away for so long, and she'd been raising their 2 children, and he'd gotten acclimated to war, and part of him still felt guilty for not being there, and there was a lot he had to work through. And by the end of the book, you felt he really got to the point where he'd worked through most of it, or at least he was to a point where he was willing to work through most of it. And he was also helping others work through the same sets of issues. So it was really sad to finish the book and know that ultimately he came through all that just to be killed by somebody. But it was very good. I wouldn't recommend it to a lot of people because he deals very frankly, or he addresses very frankly, war and killing from a soldier's perspective. So I think there would be a lot of people that it would rub the wrong way. But if you have any interest in the Chris Kyle story, which is very famous right now, I would recommend it. If you like other nonfiction dealing with war, I think you could definitely appreciate this one. Otherwise, I would recommend probably most people stay away from it. Just my suggestion. The last nonfiction that I read in the month of February was The Man Who Loved Books Too Much. The True Story of a Thief, a Detective, and a World of Literary Obsession. This book is by Allison, Hoover, Bartlett. It tells the story of John Gilkey, who was a man who was determined to have a library of rare books so other people would think more of him. His story to me wasn't that interesting because he basically stole rare books using check and credit card fraud, which is not the most captivating story to tell. But to me, the most interesting part of his story was how he justified everything and how he honestly didn't feel like he was doing anything wrong. That was pretty interesting. But the best part of the book was actually when Allison Bartlett interviewed rare book dealers, and she put some of their stories of great finds and rare books in there. That was the most interesting part. So for me, as someone who would love to be able to open up a rare bookstore and wish fervently that I had millions of dollars to go out and buy rare books, that was kind of drool-worthy. Gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I wasn't overly impressed with the rest of the book, but it was pretty decent writing, and it was also pretty short. It was only like 258 pages, and it was a pretty easy read. But I wouldn't recommend it unless you just happen to really be interested in credit card fraud, or if you like hearing about really rare books, really expensive rare books, then this one would be worth checking out. Then I read 2 modern classics in the month of February. First was Animal Farm by George Orwell. I'd never read any George Orwell. I didn't know much about him other than a lot of people loved him. Animal Farm was incredible. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I think it should be required reading for every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth. It was just absolutely incredible. Like I said, I would recommend it for anyone. It's like 125 pages. It won't take you long. It reads almost like a children's book. And the fact that it deals with this farm full of animals who decide to overthrow humans and set up a fair and just society, and then you get to see it completely unravel and become basically a dictatorship. This book left me mad, like very mad, but it's the point. That's why he wrote it the way he wrote it, is to elicit an emotional response. He published this right around the end of World War II, or maybe right after World War II. This is basically a satirical retelling of the communist revolution in Russia, and he had a hard time getting it published because at the time the English were still allies with Russia, but just an incredible book. The last book that I read was Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and I think I'm going to have to devote an entire video to how much this book sucked, because I didn't like it. I gave it a 1-star rating, and I typically reserve 1-star ratings for books that I can't finish, and I justify giving Slaughterhouse-Five a 1-star rating even though I finished it, because if it hadn't been so well hyped by people, I wouldn't have finished it, because like a third of the way through, it was just boring as all get out. I actually went back after I finished the book and watched a lot of reviews, read the Cliff Notes, read a bunch of reviews, trying to understand what I missed. And anytime I read a positive review, which they are almost all positive, there's very few negative reviews about this book. I might be the first person on the face of the earth to not like this book. I understand that, and I do apologize for people that are fans of this book. But anytime I would come across someone who was like, oh, it was a great book for this or this reasons, my first thought would be, well, we couldn't have read the same book, because you're saying this book was funny and I didn't. The only time I laughed in this book was when the book ended, because I was just so happy to be done with it. I didn't really see how it was an anti-war book. I didn't feel anything for anything that happened in the book or any of the characters, except for the horses that Pilgrim and his POW buddies are riding around on after the firebombing of Dresden, and then some German people come up and are chiding Billy because the horses don't have any shoes and their feet are bleeding and they're about to keel over. It's the only time I felt anything remotely close to sympathy throughout the entire book. The book didn't leave me feeling anything other than that Kurt Vonnegut's just a horrible fraud for making this book so popular. But yeah, I think I might do a video later trying to better explain why I didn't like this book, even though part of me feels if you've read this book, you should understand why I didn't like it. But yeah, I'm sure that'll tick a couple of people off, and I do apologize. I just could not stand it. I am curious to hear if his writing style is similar in all of his books, or if he was just trying a couple of different things that just really didn't work for me in Slaughterhouse-Five. But yeah, that was my month of February. It was very enjoyable, except for Slaughterhouse-Five. And to be fair, I technically started that back in December and got like 2/3 of the way through it, and then couldn't make myself finish it in all of January. And finally in February, I was like, I've got to finish this, and I was hoping it would end better, and it just, yeah, it didn't get any better. It didn't really like fall off at the end. It was just completely flat through the entire course of the book, and it wasn't even that long, but it still, like I said, it took me like almost 2.5 months to finish. Yeah, so maybe there's something wrong with me, because I seem to dislike a lot of popular books. I don't know. Maybe there is. Maybe I just I don't. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. But thank you all very much for watching. Feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, and hopefully I will see you all soon.